Hi guys, welcome back to a new special episode on the PS2 Collector. And on this episode, I'm going to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the release of the original PlayStation. Can't you believe it? It's been 30 years. 30 years of great games, memories, and boy, I've got a lot to discuss. Stay tuned. You definitely do not want to miss this. So, as you know, next week on the 3rd of December is going to be the 30th anniversary of the original PlayStation release. So I want to quickly discuss the brief history about the original release. So let's look at the console. So on December 3rd, 1994 in Tokyo, Japan, the original PlayStation was released. So as you know, in the early 90s, it was mainly dominated by Sega and Nintendo. Nintendo had the Super SNES and Sega had the Mega Drive. In North America, you call it the Sega Genesis. And the original plans were Nintendo and Sony were planning to create a hybrid console called the Nintendo PlayStation, but unfortunately at the last minute Nintendo pulled out the deal and went with Panasonic instead, and you know how that turned out. So in response, Sony decided to create a console to compete with Nintendo and Sega. So Ken Kutaragi originally wanted the PlayStation to be a 2D based console, but Virtua Fighter got released in '93 and that changed the perspective of future of gaming. So Sony went in the direction to create a 3D console. And yeah, so for me, the early part of the original PlayStation, it was not struggling a bit, it was trying to find its identity, because in 1996 Tekken 2 was released, Battle Arena Shinden, I think GTA 2 was released. It was trying to find games to, stick out. So the earliest game that I can remember for the PlayStation that was a huge hit was Crash Bandicoot in 1996. That was the unofficial mascot of the PlayStation. But yeah, it took the PlayStation a couple of years to get into the market, and I think in 1998 everything changed. Look at the games that came out: Metal Gear Solid, Final Fantasy VII, and for me the greatest fighting game of all time, Tekken 3. So 98 was a huge hit, and that they never looked back after 98. So my memories of this console is I've played many games for it. For me, my favorite games were Spyro the Dragon, Smackdown, Tekken 1, Tekken 2, Tekken 3, Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil 2. So many great games that defined this console. So I'm going to show you a couple of games that I've got, like I discussed before. This is my original copy of Smackdown. I've got the Platinum version, which I bought in 2000 or late 2000. That's that. Also, Tekken 2, Tekken 1, and if you look at it now, my favorite game, the game that made me a gamer, for me, my favorite game of all time, Tekken 3. I argue with a lot of people. People say to me Street Fighter 2 is the godfather of fighting games, but for me, if you look at the peak, the game that changed the genre, the game that made Tekken the success it is today, is because of this game. Absolutely a phenomenal game. The system, Namco was absolutely struggling with Virtua Fighter on the Sega Genesis and Sega Saturn, but when Tekken 3 came out, that put Virtua Fighter out of the way, and Street Fighter could not compete with the new generation of fighting games, and that was Tekken 3. Amazing game. And I also got some Japanese games such as King of Fighters 1996. So this is another great game, but unfortunately these games were only released in Japan, and I had to get this PlayStation modded just so that I can play my Japanese imports. And the swan song for the original PlayStation was FIFA Football 2005. So this was it. This was the last game that ever released for the original PlayStation. And for me, the PS1 sold 102 million copies worldwide, and 25 years later we got the PlayStation Classic. Look at the size deviation between both of them. This is the up-to-date PlayStation Classic, and this is the original PlayStation. 25 years apart, and now 30 years. This is 5 years old and this is 25 years old. Time just flies when you're having fun. So let's talk about the PlayStation successor. For me, as you can tell by this channel's name, for me, I'm a huge fan of this system. The amount of memories, the amount of great games that came out of this console is absolutely understated. Released in March 4th of 2000, the original PlayStation 2. No introduction needed whatsoever, but I had to introduce it. It is a bit beat up. It's been 24 years, so time does take its toll, unfortunately. But the amount of games, where do I begin? I'm just going to show you quick games that I had for this console. Games like Burnout 3 Takedown, to this day the greatest arcade racing game of all time. We had bloody Final Fantasy 13. We had GTA 3, Vice City, PES 6, the greatest football game of all time. I want to argue that. If you want to argue that, leave in the comments below. We had Tekken 5, Vice City Stories, Jak and Daxter, the precursor Legacy, and Naughty Dog, if you're watching, please bring back Jak and Daxter. Absolutely underrated series that, and should be coming back. And for me, one of my greatest action platformers of all time, Ratchet and Clank. And this game, the variety cannot be overstated. The amount of games that this console had is uncomparable to even modern day consoles. The time was special for gamers. That time was epic because the competition, let's talk about the competition for now. The original Xbox, the Sega Dreamcast, and Nintendo GameCube, them three consoles and their own right were amazing as well. But the PlayStation 2 was the one to get. A lot of my friends had the PlayStation 2. Xbox at the time was quite new to the market, and gamers just did not trust Windows to compete with its competitors. Nintendo GameCube also came out a year later, and they had amazing games in their own right. They had the Wind Waker, Super Mario Sunshine, for me one of my favorite Mario games of all time. But the Dreamcast was gone at the time when this came out. This put the Dreamcast out of business, but people might say the Dreamcast was a dead console. At the time I thought it was, because not a lot of people got the Dreamcast. But when I got it a couple of years later, I was surprised that that console was at the time really underappreciated and one of the most innovative consoles I've ever seen, because it had online gaming. The PlayStation 2 eventually did get online gaming, and as well as the Xbox, but the Dreamcast was the first one to do it. But let's get back to the topic, the PS2. So the PS2 to this day is still the highest selling console of all time. 160 million units sold. That says it all. The amount of console this game sold, and there was many other versions such as the PS2 Slim. So the Slim, as you can tell by the size comparison, is quite smaller, and for me it runs more faster than the original fat PS2. And there was also a silver version and many other color variations, which you can see on my other videos. But yeah, it was an amazing time, and that generation of gaming I will never forget. And if you have many memories of the PS2, leave it in the comments below. Let's talk about the successor to possibly the greatest console of all time. So the PS3 had to deliver at all costs. When I first saw the E3 trailers for the release of the PS3, the pricing point was suspect. £700 or $800 in North America were ridiculous. In for the time, that is an absolute ridiculous pricing point to put it at, especially when the Xbox 360 was selling for nearly half that. But yeah, so if you're gonna pay the money, you better deliver with great games, and unfortunately the PS3 disappointed a lot of gamers, especially the release games for it, such as Resistance and MotorStorm. Those were amazing games, but the games that the Xbox 360 were offering were night and day when the PS3 came out. So it had a really tough start. So let's look at the original fat console. So here it is. It is gigantic. For me, it does look like a piece of art with the Spider-Man font, which I really liked at the time. The main issue that they had, that the developers had, was making games for the PS3 due to its hardware. So it took developers years to get it right, and for majority of that era, the Xbox 360 was destroying the PS3. In my opinion, when it came to the games, the Xbox 360 was just a superior system to the PS3, unfortunately. So it took, after let's say 2009, 2010, the PS3 decided to rebrand. So they changed the cover art. So I'm going to show you the cover art, the way they changed it. I'm just going to put the PS3 down here. So we look at the cover art for these two games. So the original PS3 had the logo on the side, and it had the red logo at the back, on the spine of the game. And the rebrand came around 2010. So you got a new slim console, and the new cover art looked like this with the new PS3 logo on the front and at the top of the cover art. So I think this is the only console to ever rebrand. And when it rebranded, we got the PS3 Slim. PS3 Slim was the first console to have the rebrand. So here you go. This was the PS3 Slim with the new logo. So it is quite. So this is when the PS3 started to thrive. The games slowly came out. GTA 5 came out. GTA 4 was a good game, don't get me wrong, but the variety was not there. So we got Infamous 2 and a couple of Ratchet & Clank games. Ratchet & Clank Crack in Time is an amazing game, but I spent majority of that era playing on the Xbox 360, unfortunately. But the PS3, I did get a couple of games that I liked of certain franchises. But there's one game I especially played on the PS3, and that was, let me show you. These were my favorite games for the PS3. I'm just gonna knock them off one by one. Sly Cooper Trilogy. I got this digitally, but I've got this sealed as well. I'm never gonna open it because I'm a huge fan of the Sly Cooper franchise. Bring it back, Naughty Dog, or Sucker Punch. And Naughty Dog, bring back Jak and Daxter. I'm waiting to this day. It is gonna happen eventually. We've got Ratchet & Clank Quest for Booty. Mass Effect, amazing game. I wish they remake the original 3 games. Goated and underappreciated and underrated. Mass Effect 3, another good one. God of War Collection, another great game. God of War Origins Collection. The Ratchet & Clank original PS2 Trilogy Collection. And my favorite PS3 game, don't laugh at it, it is Ratchet & Clank Crack in Time. I know what you guys are gonna say. What about GTA 4 and GTA 5? I played that on the Xbox 360 because simply it ran way better and the online servers were way more superior to the PS3. And yeah, so that's my memories for the PS3. Discuss the PS3 successor, which was the PS4. So after the disappointment with the PS Vita and the PS3, the PS4 had to deliver, and dare I say, it definitely did. There were so many great games for it. It was the first introduction for the Horizon Zero Dawn series, which for me is an underrated series. The visuals of that game is amazing. It's phenomenal. The story as well, the in-depth story of that game is, I'll say, it's criminally underrated, and it's one of the best games on the PS4. And its successor, the Horizon Forbidden West, is another great game. There's also games like Ghost of Tsushima, another great game, and for me, the best game on the PS4 were between these two games, Red Dead Redemption 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, two amazing open world games. And I'm going to introduce you games that I quite liked on the PS4, and those were Resident Evil 2, which is a remake of the original Resident Evil 2, Final Fantasy 7 Remake, which is again another remake. As you know, let's talk about remakes. Quite recently, especially in the last 6-7 years, there's been loads of remasters, remakes, and I do get quite concerned with that, because it's like the game developers now have lost ideas. There's no innovation in games, there's no new franchises, and there's no particular variety that was on the PS2 and on the PS3. But I digress. So this was a remake of the original Final Fantasy VII, which was released in 1998, and it's a really great game. But its successor, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 on the PS5 and on PS4, that's another great game, and that has more in-depth missions and activities you can do in the game, such as side quests. But this is another great game. And another one I've got is Burnout Paradise, again remastered. So this is a remaster of the original Burnout Paradise, which is released on the PS3. I've got the sealed because I've got the digital version and I've got the PS3 version, so this is never ever going to be opened. And Tekken 7, now I'm gonna go on a quick rant here. Please do forgive me, I'm gonna go on a quick rant because this was meant to be the swan song of Heihachi Mishima. End of a chapter, a closed book, let's just say. The rivalry between Kazuya and Heihachi, the 30 plus years of rivalry, was ended in this game. But unfortunately, the story went again around in a circle because Heihachi is alive. And for me, that just killed any meaning of this game. It's made this game irrelevant. The story of this game now has become irrelevant, and that was sad to see, because Tekken 7 is a great game, but Tekken 8 ruined it for me. And yeah, so Tekken 7 was a good game, but it got ruined by Tekken 8. For fighting games, this is possibly the best fighting game on the PS4, bar none. If you disagree, leave in the comments below. There were also God of War, Shenmue 1 and 2, I know, remaster, I digress, you know how it is nowadays. But yeah, Shenmue 1 and 2 were a very groundbreaking games for their time, and we got to, you know, experience it in the modern day system. Shenmue 3 for me was a disappointment because they tried to just basically keep it as is, but they had to understand gaming has changed over the 20 plus years, and unfortunately Sega did not deliver with Shenmue 3. Will we see a Shenmue 4? I just want Shenmue to finally have its conclusion. Will Ryo finally defeat Lan Di? I hope so. And other games for it, my favorite PS4 game, Horizon Zero Dawn, Ys 8 Lacrimosa of Dana, and the recently popular Fallout 4, another amazing game. And nowadays, with the release of the Amazon series, this game has become very popular with collectors. But yeah, PS4 in all was a great console. We got to see the introduction of a PlayStation VR, so we got to see new aspects of gaming, especially with the VR. But yeah, PS4, a great console. So let's talk about the latest console that was released by the Sony PlayStation, that is the PS5. So let's talk about the latest addition to the PlayStation family, and that is the PS5. And I'm gonna say something controversial. I think the PS5 is the worst generation when it comes to PlayStation consoles, because I think the developers now have run out of ideas. There's no originality, there's no new games coming out, and games are taking time to develop. Back in the days, we used to get new games every year. We used to be spoiled back in the days. We used to get games every year. But now, with the development time now, and you know, to get the best out of certain games, it takes years in development to come out. and that just kills the vibe. And what we get in its replacement, remasters and remakes. And what defines that is, unfortunately, the PS5. An amazing looking console, don't get me wrong, it is an amazing looking console, but again, the games for it is just taking time to come out. But I have enjoyed a couple of games, such as Ghost of Tsushima, the Director's Cut, that's a good game. Horizon Forbidden West, Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, Tekken 8 is a good game. Street Fighter 6, now hang on here. Now I'm going to argue with the Tekken fans out there. Trust me, I am the biggest Tekken fan possibly on the planet. But I'm going to say this right now, Street Fighter 6 is a better game than Tekken 8. Put the hate in the comments. I think that Street Fighter 6 on the PS5 is the best fighting game on this console, and possibly for the last 5-10 years. Do you know why? Because Street Fighter 6 went into detail to put non-online modes into the game, such as the story mode, which is very long, 40 hours story mode, where you can fight anyone in an open world. Imagine Tekken 8 had that. What Tekken, don't get me wrong, when it comes to mechanics, Tekken 8 is way superior. But with Street Fighter 6, you get an in-depth story, you get more offline modes, which I prefer, because online nowadays is emphasized too much with fighting games, and that for me makes me angry, because Tekken 8's story was poor and fast. I'm thinking in Tekken 8, why did they introduce story mode to be like 5 hours? It wasn't even that long. And that for me was a disappointment, and I platinumed the game within 2 days. But Street Fighter 6, the story was like expertly proportioned, where you have to level up your character to defeat legendary fighters on your journey to complete the story. And that for me, the depth of that is something that I enjoy. And Street Fighter 6, hats off to you, hats off to Capcom. You, personally for me, you are now the #1 fighting game franchise on the planet. Tekken, please take note. Virtua Fighter, please release Virtua Fighter 6, because you guys need to return, because fighting games now are very poor. Sorry about the rant, but it had to be done. But yeah, there's Tekken 8 on this game, good looking game, but the story's quite poor. Street Fighter 6, as I said, phenomenal game. Final Fantasy 7 Remake is another great game. Liza P, bloody hell, I've got my butt kicked in that game. Demon's Souls, Elden Ring, those get battered every time I play it. But yeah, PS5, one thing that made me annoyed was the amount of remakes and remaster. Horizon Zero Dawn, the original Horizon Zero Dawn, that got a remaster as well, and I'm thinking, what's the point? So it's like, I think now with the release of the PS Port, I think now, exactly, especially nowadays, they're gonna emphasize on portable game, because it's come to a time where portable devices are now taking over, such as your mobile phones. The PS Port is released just so we can play our PS5 on the go. Is that something I want to know? Because I've got other handhelds that I enjoy more often. I'm going to discuss that after this PS5. But yeah, for me, PS5 needs to, you know, get the games going, man, because 4 years it's been dead. In my opinion, GTA 6 can't come soon enough, and the future of gaming now looks bleak. But for me personally, a lot of gamers, please give indie gamers a chance, because they are putting their heart and passion into games, and we're getting great indie games such as Sally Face. That's a really good game, and games like Hollow Knight, which is like a Metroidvania. Those games don't get appreciated because they're not AAA graphics, because unfortunately nowadays graphics sells. And it's sad to see, because gameplay used to be the pinnacle rather than graphics. But yeah, hopefully PS5 does recover, because the lack of competition. That's what a lot of gamers have now gone to the Switch, because games on the Switch like Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, era-defining games, Tears of the Kingdom, phenomenal. Mario Odyssey, Nintendo right now are gonna eventually overtake PlayStation. But unfortunately, until then, PS5 needs to up its game. But if you disagree with that, leave it in the comments below. The final thing that I want to discuss will be the portable consoles for the ones that Sony released, and those were the PSP and the PS Vita. So let's begin with the PSP. So this was released in 2005. At the time, I was amazed when I first saw the E3 for this. I couldn't believe that you can play PS2 games on the go, and this was it. PSP was 2005 and it was a success, but sadly at the time, let me show you, at the time another portable console was released, and those were the Nintendo DS and 3DS. These two are the highest selling portable consoles of all time, and unfortunately obliterated Sony PSP. So due to that being out, this console became irrelevant over time, and for many gaming enthusiasts, this console has been forgotten. A lot of people doesn't know that this even existed, and that's sad to see, because this console had loads of variety of games. You know, it had Lumines, it had SmackDown vs. Raw, Vice City Stories, it had Metal Gear Solid, and Ratchet and Clank Size Matters. Some good games came off of the PSP, you know, but the DS just made it irrelevant, and that was sad to see. And it took Sony 7 years to release its sequel, and that was a tremendous shame for me personally. PS Vita. So this was released in 2011, beginning of the end of the PS3 and slowly approaching PS4. So the Vita had 2 good years between 2011 and 2012. Those 2 years were the golden generation for the Vita. I'm going to show you some games that came off of it. It's on my shelf. Let's go to my shelf. We had games like, let's put these out, like Persona 4 Golden, God of War Collection, because I'm a massive God of War fan because I play on the go, Injustice Among Us, FIFA 13, why not, Mortal Kombat, and a PlayStation Vita exclusive. I'm surprised that this game has not been updated or part of a collection, is Uncharted Golden Abyss. So these were some great games for the PS Vita. It was like playing PS3 on the go. And after that, the PlayStation just gave up on it, and I'm so surprised because this console had huge potential, you know. It had huge potential, but Sony never capitalized on its early success, and instead they started focusing on promoting the PS4. So for me, in my personal opinion, I think the PS4 destroyed the Vita's chances of progressing. And about 2018-19 was the last time we ever seen a game released for the Vita. I know Airsoft does release some shoot 'em up, I think, or beat 'em ups for these games, but those are very limited and not released in mass quantity. But yeah, that was unfortunately the end of the PS Vita. And the PS Portal is coming, has came out, but I don't count that as a console. I count that as extension and hardware. But there are rumors where Sony is trying to compete with this console, the Nintendo Switch. For me, I think Sony should go in the direction where Nintendo was going about 7 years ago, where they wanted to create a hybrid between gaming at home and gaming on the go. So if Sony rumors are true and they try to create a competitor for the Switch, for me personally, the best console of a generation. And this console I'll discuss in another episode. But if Sony does go in this direction, please release some great games to compete with this, because you're not going to beat the Switch going the way you are now, because no one's going to want to play remasters. They want something fresh. So you've got to be more like this, the Steam Deck. I'm going to open this up. So you've got to be like Sony Steam, not Sony Steam Deck, but Valve Steam. You've got to be like this with the extended screen. You can go online, you can download games, get emulators, you know, create a variety for gamers, you know what I mean? That's what I want to see for the Sony PlayStation. But let's stick to the comment. It is 30 years since the original PlayStation came out, and again I want to see 30 years more of great gaming. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe. If you want to know when my videos come online, click on the bell notification below. Anyways guys, until next time, and don't forget to subscribe. Take care guys.